His Darkling Creature by Ergrud Ma, illustrated by Art Gaines. Chapter 2. Hollow Clubs and Parties. My name is Decima Verdandi, and I'm a lot like you, a clever and educated girl with good friends and a healthy and natural focus on my social life. My social scene is probably a bit larger than yours, though. Mine is multiplanetary. I felt an instantaneous surge of relief as I stepped into the club on Jupiter City 9, passing under the establishment's giant holographic sign, the Nebula's Edge. Bass beats thrummed through the crystalline floor, filling me with feelings of strength and power, like a predatory animal. You know how it is when you walk into one of those clubs that costs more credits than most people see in a month? The kind of place where the champagne flows like water and the holographic projectors paint galaxies across the ceiling. We got in for free, of course. The sunset streaming through the massive viewport took my breath away. Those crimson and gold clouds stretched endlessly through Jupiter's atmosphere, diffusing the distant sun's light into something that belonged in a painting rather than reality. Decima, you look absolutely stunning tonight. Lyra squeezed my arm as we claimed our spot near the upper balcony's railing. She was right, of course. You'd recognize the effort I'd put in. The little black dress hugged every curve perfectly, and I'd chosen my most comfortable dancing pumps after that disaster at the Titan social last month, where I'd spent half the night hobbling around in those ridiculous stilettos. The black choker with its midnight crystals caught the club's ambient lighting just right, and the green ribbon on my wrist. Well, that was my small contribution to raising awareness about workers' rights on Kepler 442b. Someone has to care about the oppressed workers, even if it's just a symbolic gesture. The music is absolutely divine, Celeste called over the synth orchestral fusion that had half the crowd swaying already. Did you hear DJ Ziotak is here? I nodded and smiled, letting their excitement wash over me. These were my people. Educated, sophisticated women who appreciated culture and knew how to enjoy themselves without losing their dignity. We'd spent our university years together studying xenolinguistics and comparative cultures, and now we were all making our marks in various corners of the known universe. Intelligent, accomplished, witty, everything a modern woman should be. The bartender, a charming young man with intricate facial tattoos from one of the outer rim colonies, mixed our cocktails with practiced flair. The Jovian sunset he handed me sparkled with genuine stardust, not the synthetic kind they served at cheaper establishments. I sipped it and felt the familiar warmth spread through my chest as the alcohol began its gentle work. To us, Lyra raised her glass, the smartest, most fabulous women in 3 star systems. We clinked glasses and laughed, and for a moment I felt that delicious sense of belonging. The music shifted to something with a stronger beat, and couples began filtering onto the main dance floor below us. The holographic projections swirled overhead, creating the illusion that we were dancing among actual nebulae. That's when the atmosphere changed. You know that feeling when the air itself seems to shift? When something enters your peripheral vision that makes your stomach clench before your brain has even processed what you're seeing? The sleek black conveyance that descended toward the club's private landing platform was unmistakable, angular and predatory, with that ridiculous red underlighting that screamed, "Look at me." The Cheney family crest glowed softly on the passenger door, visible even from our vantage point. "Oh, frig Steger faster photum," I swore under my breath. "Frigga's stamping foot." "What's wrong?" Celeste followed my gaze, and her expression immediately shifted to one of sympathy. "Oh, darling, he's here." Horace Cheney stepped out of his conveyance like he owned not just the club, but the entire floating city. You'd probably find him insufferably confident, too. That way he carried himself, as though the universe had been specifically designed for his personal enjoyment. His black suit fit him perfectly, probably tailored on one of the fashion worlds where a single jacket cost more than most people's annual salary. The inside lining of his jacket was an alarming bright yellow silk. It wasn't visible at the moment, with the slow, deliberate motions he was making, but I knew it was there. I'd slipped my hand up underneath his jacket often enough during those few weeks when I'd foolishly thought we had something special. His mousy brown hair caught the club's lighting as he flicked it out of his eyes. That gesture I'd once found endearing and now wanted to slap right out of him. He was a head taller than nearly any other man in the club, and his boyish good looks and flashing white smile was so magnetic that everyone, man and woman, could not help but turn to see who it was. The white cravat at his throat was as ostentatious as always, a sign of his family's old money pretensions. As if on cue, the beat dropped, and the lighting scheme changed as he stepped into the club. He looked around the room and smiled, turning his head slowly to take in the room. Then he tilted his head up and cast an appraising look up at the impossibly thin girl wearing a cyborg costume, like something out of a video game, who stood, posing, on a glowing white stage near the entrance. Her entire body was covered in sleek, black, form-fitting, robotic-looking armor, with pipes and wires that hugged every curve and contour. On her face, only her mouth and nose were visible, her head and eyes encased in a robotic-looking helmet, with lasers shining from the eyes and tubes protruding out the back of her head and running up into the darkness above. In her hands, she held two realistic-looking laser guns, with real laser beams shining from the tips, visible in the smoky atmosphere of the club. As Horace turned to look at her, she changed poses and brought one of the laser beams of her toy guns to rest on his forehead. Smiling with his mouth closed, he nodded at her with a slow, upward tilt of his head and gave her a little salute. The girl tilted her head as if deliberating, then nodded back and struck a new pose, her laser beam leaving his forehead and finding a new target. But it wasn't Horace or his little interaction with the girl on the stage that made my heart sink into my perfectly fitted pumps. It was her. The girl clinging to his arm like she belonged there, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. She wasn't even prettier than me. Objectively speaking, you'd probably agree that I had the advantage in several key areas. But there was something about the way she moved, the confidence in her smile, the casual way she touched his chest as they walked toward the club entrance. "Who is she?" Lyra asked, though she was trying to be diplomatic about it. "Nobody special," I said, but the words tasted bitter. "Just another conquest, I'm sure." I watched them enter the club proper, noting how the crowd seemed to part for them naturally. Horace had that effect. People gravitated toward him without even realizing it. It was one of the things that had drawn me to him in the first place, back when I'd thought his attention meant something more than a temporary diversion. The girl, I refused to learn her name, had lighter hair than mine, styled in one of those effortlessly tousled ways that probably took an hour to achieve. Her dress was a deep emerald that complemented her fuller figure, particularly her more generous bust line. She was several inches taller than me, which made her legs look endless in those designer heels. "I'm any other girl's equal," I told myself fiercely, gripping my cocktail glass tighter than necessary. "More than equal. If she even has an education, it's probably nothing compared to mine." They found a spot on the lower dance floor, and I couldn't stop myself from watching as Horace spun her expertly through the opening moves of a Martian waltz. The yellow lining of his jacket flashed as he raised his arms, and she laughed delightedly at something he said. When the music shifted to something more intimate, she pressed herself against his chest and began playing with that ridiculous white cravat. "Decima, let's go dance," Celeste suggested gently. "There are plenty of attractive men here who would be thrilled to—" "I'm fine," I interrupted, but I could hear the sharp edge in my own voice. Why are boys like that? The question burned in my mind as I watched Horace guide his new plaything through another turn. Why do they charm you, make you feel special and desired and important, only to cast you aside like yesterday's news? I'd thought what we had meant something. We'd talked for hours about literature and philosophy, about the future of interstellar civilization. We'd shared intellectual connections that I'd foolishly believed were rare and precious. I'd lain in his bed and teased him as he tried to work, imagining the hungry butterflies in my stomach would never go away. Apparently, I'd been wrong. By Frigga's will and wand, I cursed under my breath, invoking the goddess whose temples had replaced the old, brutal shrines to that arrogant fool Odin. May he reap exactly what he's sown. It was probably unfair of me to assume, but I'd heard whispers that Horus, like too many young men of his, or any social class, secretly favored the old ways. There were rumored to still be underground temples to the one-eyed deceiver, hidden gatherings where they offered disgusting animal sacrifices and worshipped that manipulative, controlling god who'd brought nothing but war and suffering before the enlightened feminine age began. The thought of anyone reverting to such barbaric beliefs made my skin crawl. Odin had been possessive, demanding, always scheming to bend others to his will, everything that modern civilization had moved beyond. The goddess Frigga represented wisdom, equality, fairness, and the equal advancement of all. Her consort Freya embodied love and beauty and the freedom to choose one's own path. The only sacrifices the goddesses required were flowers and wine, not blood and viscera. Together, the goddesses Frigga and Freya had upended the oppressive patriarchal expectations forced upon the fairer sex and ushered in an era where women could pursue education, careers, and personal fulfillment without being treated as property or prizes to be won. Watching Horus spin his new toy around the dance floor, I wondered if he saw any of us as more than temporary entertainment. "What does she have that I don't?" I whispered to myself, studying the girl's movements. Her fuller lips, her more generous curves, her longer legs, were those really the only things that mattered? Was intelligence worthless? Was education just an attractive accessory until something prettier came along? The music swelled, and the holographic projections shifted to simulate a journey through the Horsehead Nebula. Couples swayed together under artificial stars, while the real sunset painted the viewport in increasingly dramatic shades of orange and gold. It should have been magical. Instead, it felt like watching my own inadequacy played out on a cosmic stage. "I need some air," I announced, setting down my barely touched cocktail. "Decima, wait!" Lyra reached for my arm, but I was already moving toward the exit. I was pretty certain that once I got outside, I'd just keep walking and never return, the bile rising too high in my throat. I pushed through the crowd, trying not to look back at the dance floor. The club's temperature control kept everything perfectly comfortable, but I felt stifled nonetheless. The laughter and conversation that had seemed so sophisticated an hour ago now felt hollow and meaningless. Outside, Jupiter City 9's industrial underbelly hummed with constant activity. The massive processing plants that refined the gas giant's atmospheric resources never stopped working, their warning lights twinkling far below the floating city's residential and commercial levels. The air recycling systems worked overtime to filter out the metallic tang that occasionally drifted up from the mining operations. I nearly collided with a group of workers heading home from their shift. They were exactly what you'd expect. Lumpy, Neanderthal-looking men with permanent stains on their coveralls and that earthy smell of mineral dust and industrial gases clinging to them like a second skin. I didn't look directly at them, but I could feel their eyes tracking my movement. No doubt they were mentally undressing me, imagining scenarios that would never happen in 1,000 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. These crude, uneducated laborers would probably appreciate my intelligence and accomplishment about as much as Horus did, which is to say, not at all. I made it to my conveyance without making eye contact with anyone else. The sleek silver craft was exactly where I'd left it in a nearby parking garage, looking modest and elegant compared to Horus's ostentatious black monstrosity. My father had bought it for me as a graduation gift when I'd landed my position with the Bureau. Not as flashy as some, but luxuriously furnished inside with real leather and a sound system that could reproduce the acoustic properties of any concert hall in all the worlds. I slumped into the seat and told the navigation system to take me home. The conveyance navigated itself smoothly out of the garage and began its journey toward my far-off apartment on Elysian 4, many light years away. Through the viewport, the eternal sunset painted the clouds in increasingly dramatic shades of crimson and gold. but the beauty felt mocking now. I queued up some music from the archives, ancient Midgard compositions in a language I'd studied during my comparative linguistics program. The haunting melodies filled the small cabin as the city's lights drifted past below. The alcohol was making me drowsy, but in a pleasant way that took the sharp edge off my disappointment. Why did I care so much about Horace Cheney anyway? There were plenty of other men in the galaxy, intelligent, successful, attractive men who would be thrilled to spend time with someone like me. I was educated, well-traveled, financially independent, and reasonably attractive. I could hold my own in conversations about literature, politics, or xenocultural theory. I was exactly the kind of woman that enlightened society claimed to value, a woman forged by Frigga and Freya themselves. So why did it feel like none of that mattered? I stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the gas giant's atmosphere, were thousands of worlds where humanity had built new civilizations. Faster-than-light travel had made it possible to spread across the galaxy like never before, colonizing planets that previous generations could only dream of reaching. Sometimes entire worlds were named after their single major city. We'd found more habitable planets than we could possibly use, more resources than we could exploit in 100 lifetimes. The universe was vast and full of opportunities. So why did I feel so small and insignificant? The music shifted to something even more melancholy, and I let myself sink deeper into the cushioned seat. My eyelids were getting heavy, and I knew I'd probably fall asleep before reaching home. The conveyance's systems would handle everything: parking, security, even waking me when we arrived. Before I drifted off completely, I spoke to my nanites and told them to begin alcohol neutralization once I was fully unconscious. Naturally, I wanted the soporific effects without the ensuing headaches. Nothing worse than waking up with a hangover when you have important work to do the next day. As sleep began to claim me, one last thought flickered through my mind. Maybe it wasn't about what that other girl had that I didn't. Maybe it was about what I had that nobody seemed to want. My brain rebelled against the suggestion and refused to progress further down that chain of thought. The stars wheeled slowly overhead as my conveyance carried me up out of the endless Jovian sunset and out into interstellar space, and I dreamed of distant worlds where things might be different.